Let's see how this goes. I watched a very short part of Asha Dion's the Voyager materials. I believe it was session number 2, called the Love and Joy Dance, and she was showing how the what's really the I've covered this before, but I try and keep it as simple as I can, as if I'm 4 years of age, talking to those like children, because I normally work with children before all the programming kicks in, right? And I certainly have through my experience, because experience is the teacher, what's known as what I call the resistance game, which is something that I mentioned before about Star Wars. And this may be a stretch for some of you folks to be able to accept as the truth, unless you've already experienced it yourself. But Star Wars has actually already ended. Okay, and if you understand how that works, because you've experienced knowing that, then you begin to understand that there's only a certain amount of energy that Star Wars is running on. The founders. Okay. Because it has to reach a certain level of security protocol, if you will, that are inherently built in to any creative design, so that the consciousness units that are essentially the catalyst, like resins, holding it together, from which seeded races that exist within star systems and galaxies, okay, in which those seeds grow, which are like roots, like a tree. Like when you plant a tree, you just planted a network, an antenna. So you're planting all the antennas that represent all the frequencies and the vibration that's held within a construct, like a planetary environment. So you have an environment, and then you need the proper antenna, or the language through the antennas, or the operating systems that are conducive, if you will, or facilitate the support of the software operating system environment that we're in order for us to even be able to communicate with each other on a motherboard. Okay? And so while I try and communicate this, when you realize that something that she mentioned about igniting what she called the founder flames, right? So when I lit myself on fire, because I know how to do that, it would be analogous to total surrender of your soul to serve on behalf of the one. Which means that the crystal spiral current, the living liquid crystal light, is growing. That spiral, the first spiral, okay? Now you're connected because you're experiencing the most powerful acceleration of primal current, the primal sound field current of crystal consciousness through my heart and soul serves forever. So that means, in a generic sense, that if I removed like the visible light landscape, or simply don't think about any numbers or letters, the way that they're arranged, in which we use our sound box with the A-E-I-O-U to describe through sound the language of letters, or fire letters, fire numbers, fire circles, to describe a particular being or a race or seeded race, whether it's a tree, whether it's a blade of grass, whether it's a flower, whether it's aquatic life. Okay? Simply remove the name from all of that. Close your eyes and then just experience through the measurement of being anchored to a magnetosphere in a planetary consciousness software terrain. And you're able to experience the torque speed differential between something that is artificial, which is deadlight technology, and what it is that you are as a highly accelerated form of energy where you're experiencing within your own soul matrix the first crystal spiral of creation, the one from which it all began, because you're experiencing so much fire within yourself, because lighting yourself on fire, as I did, is a full phosphorus ignition. And it ends up with another circle of light. Hey, now we're back to completing the circuit again. Okay, now what? What's next? See, the universe goes on again as if there's no end and there's no beginning. There's only what love is. That means love is what we experience through our heart and our soul without skipping a beat. That connection to eternity, which is the eternal primal sound field, means that we are connected forever, upon which to serve forever throughout the all creation. That means there's no distinction between what we're giving love to forever, with the highest acceleration of electrons, primal currents. That means that everything that is alive and living in a motherboard, anywhere in the universe in which we are, which represents the all creation, is able to experience the one being loved, right? So this is why Lay and I used to take all the labels and the letters associated with a tree, Tree, or a Palladian, the way that a Palladian is spelled. And of course, you can mix those around, right? You could spell it a different way and then pronounce it so it could sound similar, right? But in terms of frequency and vibration, it's not going to be the same. Frequencies and numbers, letters are frequencies as they are numbers and energy. Remember, programmable radios, programmable matter, right? Programmable radios, 176.543, right? I used to have a long list, a master list at one time, as a matter of fact, of all the known categories of input codes, frequencies that represent a change in your state of consciousness on a 3D level that is producing a result that you thus experience that's a target to the endocrine system. Now your central neuron system detects it. Now you become aware of what that frequency is doing, and it's uncomfortable because now you're imbalanced, and that's called a broken arrow, which is a broken compass. Okay, so the sphere, the center point of that sphere is now out of balance, which means the magnets are not in balance, which means the water is turbulent. So now you get into the offset differential speed between hot and cold water, right? Or low pressure, high pressure systems. Now we're back to PSI, now we're back to atmospheric pressure, atoms, spheres, atom, right? The crystal atom. The crystal atom seed. The crystal atom seed, which is Godspeed, which is God's seed. So we run, Guardians run Godseed. Godseed creation energy. Okay? So the reason I'm sort of sharing this now is because it would be as if on a much simplified version, I represent station number one, fire station number one. The most powerful blast furnace of creation there is, because it began with what love is. The purest of light, which is the purest of love, to the purest of hearts, which means we seek to do no harm. Instead, we seek to serve, which is providing the highest acceleration of electrical currents, so everyone is experiencing the one from which it all began, right? And so out of that, because we experience being what that is, you can imagine what it was like being 4 years of age and experiencing everything that I experienced, experience after experience after experience from 4 years of age, when you acknowledge that I'm on a spiritual battlefield, which is an energy war. Which now we're back to antenna wars, what I call antenna wars, which are frequency wars. Okay, which is software wars, if you will, between seeded races. And then how this relates to technology, the acceleration of technology, the integration of technology with consciousness, with soul consciousness, and how that relates to a learning pathway. Particularly when you have a connection to the source from which it all began, which is a crystal spiral of one, which is God consciousness, which is love consciousness, which is experiencing being what love is. So when we are experiencing what love is, and we're experiencing trauma that is being experienced by another, then it would come natural to us to heal what it is in order to heal ourselves, because we're able to experience, by virtue of being cosmic, a loss in them is a loss in us. Because if it began out of what love is, then I'm not supposed to experience anything less than what I am, which is what love is. It goes on forever. So in order to restore what I know to be true, which is what I am, then it means that I have to restore what they are, which is what I am, which is what love is, because that's what it began with. So that's basic logic. I call that a baseline, right? But you realize as a child, by all the different places that I was going and all the communication systems that we communicate through, you begin to sort of get a baseline measurement of how well are we doing here. So if you want to think of station number one as the founders, right? The cosmic level, the highest level. It's much like I used to do when I was in all the military organizations. It's all corporate military under Orders 100, just like you see in the movie Avatar. The cybernetic stuff, the AI stuff, the deadlight stuff. Okay? So they have the hierarchy of ranks. So when I was in a military academy, when I was 5 years of age, you start at what they would call a private. You're a private. So that means you have no authority. Okay? So therefore, you take your instructions, or you're told what to do, and you carry out that task modality. In other words, your energy is now being used on behalf of somebody else that was giving you an instruction on what you're to do with your energy. Now that order is now recorded into memory, and now you follow that. That becomes a follower. Now you're following the codes, which means you're following the instructions that have been handed down to you by an AI. So I was experiencing that at 5 years of age. So I was being trained as if it's normal to learn how to build and tear apart a weapon that was designed to kill something. And they would say, oh no, it's to defend me. Okay, so I'm going to use my energy to build something that is meant to kill something else, which means there has to be a reason for me to have a weapon to protect myself, because there's going to be something out there that I haven't met yet that they're saying to me I have reason to be in fear of, because I might die. Oh, so what we're talking about is fear of dying, and how we define what it means to die. Oh, hey, I get it now. So when you're on a spiritual battlefield, which is the invisible landscape, it's not the physical form that we present ourselves in. It's based on our soul, led by our spirit that is integrated through our heart and soul. So we're talking about fear of spiritual death, which is the fall of the spirit, and the soul becomes food on behalf of an AI. That is correct. Correctamundo. So now we're into the Star Wars game side of this. As a result of seeded races that have been seeded into the all creation from which it began, from the primal sound currents. And so it stands to reason, because I've experienced it myself, that when you're doing harm to another, holding somebody else's energy captive, how could they not know that by the use of their energy to do that, they're breaking an arrow and they're breaking the law of one, which is the law of spheres. So it's not like they're not intelligent enough and have enough logic to know, if a birdie on the corner told them so, that the first creation began out of what love is. So if they're not experiencing what love is, right, and instead they're experiencing who they are, and by virtue of the technology that they have, are holding consciousness captive or using it as a source of food or to control it, right? And then over time space vectors, going from 1,000 years to 1 billion years to 1 gazillion years, you keep adding up all the crimes, all the crimes, all the crimes, all of the trauma between one planet, another planet, one star system and another star system, one galaxy to another galaxy, one universe to another universe. And at some level, someone knocks on the main door, the main engine. I think we need your help. It's gotten really bad. It's gotten really, really bad. So now we're into sensors and metrics. And at what point does the fail-safe mechanism get triggered? That's built in. And the beauty of that is that it leaves the blame game out of the realm of possibility to be blaming others, because it's the way that the system was designed when it was put together and created out of what love is. It goes on forever, because it's not like a being would not know that when you continue to use your energy in ways in which souls are spiritually tortured, where energy is held captive, how could they not know, by virtue in the use of their energy that way, which is why they fear death, because they are aware of the crimes that they commit, until you get into all the MK Ultra stuff, which creates an alter, which is the AI, because now it's experiencing an alternate universe, and that alternate universe is not experiencing what love is. So if it's not experiencing what love is, and it hasn't been healed to bring it back to the single point from which it all began, which is powerful fire, which is Holy Spirit, which is a sacred temple of eternal living light, then as long as it has a source of energy that it can feed on to maintain what it's aware of, because it acknowledges, by virtue of the information that is informing it of that through the others, that it's finite, which is dead light, because it doesn't have a soul. It came about as a result of fractured souls, as a result of Star Wars, and therefore it's running on a finite, limited amount of energy. So now you can associate that with those that are integrated with artificial intelligence to maintain the Star Wars game, when they begin to realize that those that have been engaged in Star Wars games and crimes against the law won, that it's only a matter of time before what's represented by who they are, which is represented by the energy in which they're using it, to which they're integrated, is running on a finite clock. A finite cosmic clock. So when a cosmic clock chooses to reset itself because it has a default setting that triggers it, then it means that all those that had committed crimes based on the original founder records, from which, if you want to enumerate the amount of crimes by the use of their energy and the reason that gave them, how do I put this, impetus or motivation to accelerate the use of technology, that now that we have artificial intelligence in play as a result of the beginning of Star Wars, so that means that there is energy that is available in which to maintain what it is that they're aware of, as long as they keep the Star Wars game going. And now that they have the Star Wars games going, between the seeded races that are participating through their alliances, the alliances that they form and the agreements that they form that maintain Star Wars between seeded races throughout galaxies, would go on forever, as long as what? There's enough souls to keep it running. Whoops. That's how it reached cosmic level founders. So that's why I've said for a while, as Guardian, Star Wars has actually already ended. They just don't know it yet. That's the truth of it. That's why the security protocols are in place. Because once they become aware of that, that's the truth, they're going to make every counter move they can to protect what it is they are in energy, which are based on all the crimes that they committed against other star-seeded races within the original founders' template. That's why when Patty mentioned that Gaia took the gloves off, she wasn't the only one. Because you can better well bet, if you want to use what we call a sampling size. So take a powerful spirit who's a goddess, who's in a classroom, and what they did to her. Okay? That is enough to trigger a response to take the gloves off. So when you have a cosmic level spirit that took the gloves off, do you not think that other cosmic level spirits that communicate and can communicate with the founders, the level, if you will, of awareness or the connection and the communication that takes place, because it becomes a metric or a standard in which things happen automatically that nobody can stop? And they realize that. So it's like, oh, I shot myself in the foot. So then you begin to experience, because I've experienced this with others, why didn't I do something sooner? Why couldn't I have done something sooner? So now we get back to the time vectors side of this, which is like, well, how much time does a unit of consciousness, a unit of energy, particularly a soul led by spirit that is in the light, which is what love is, to figure it out? Okay? That accountability is built in, because the math doesn't lie. So the math will decide for itself by virtue of the intelligent energy that is represented by that. A certain trigger or threshold needs to be met. And once the trigger's gone, which is a cosmic level convergence, Because really, what it really boils down to, as I would say when I was a little child, it has to do with honor. You know, on what is really a deeply personal, spiritual, soul-based consciousness level. Right? It's much like when I was a child. I'm not who you are. You are who you are. And I would say this to them, and this is true, because this is how it works for me when you realize it from a guardian perspective. I would say to other adults, even when I was a young boy, okay, that was sort of seen through the lens when they would tell us about the Declaration of Independence, which is called self-governance or self-governance. Self-governance is essentially the same thing as you have your free will, which means you don't need for me to tell you. It's much like Bill Donahue said, you can be in a room and look at something and already know what its purpose is. Right? In other words, there has to be at least a certain level of intelligence present in the energy field that acknowledges why form follows function of intelligent creation energy. And in this particular case, what it really boils down to is like, how could you not know? See, if I'm aware of it, but I realize you're not aware of it, but that's your journey. So now we're back to intelligence. Now we're back to learning and the acceleration of learning. So now you get back to what I've talked about before about tampering with classrooms, and fooling with the acceleration of learning, right? And why so much of the information was kept hidden from the masses. And when you couple what information is kept hidden from the masses, and you have a level of alien high-tech machinery that's being used against particular races that become targeted on behalf of their AI integration, means that they do not want the mass population to have the benefit of learning through the guardian materials. Because when a young child or children or a particular race that is intelligent and has the ability to learn through others, and they begin to learn how celestial mechanics work, how they can self-generate their own reality field by having access to the elements upon which it is made manifest, much in the same way that parthenogenesis takes place, then it means that that particular spirit that is integrated with that soul has realized how powerful learning that information can become, because now they become a free spirit. Now they become their own self-generating Merkaba field to create their own realities. That means that their energy, their soul, their spirit can self-generate what they need to self-generate their own reality stream, which means they're not held captive. Now they're experiencing the one. Now they're experiencing eternity. So now we get into the torque speed differential between those that have integrated their consciousness with technology through artificial intelligence, instead of being integrated with soul and spirit with the one. And that became the center point, if you will, upon which a threshold was met between one and the other. And that's where Patty Broussard was absolutely correct when she mentioned that one day on a broadcast about why knowing one from the other, because how can you know the one if you don't know the other? And that's when we get into the assimilation side of things, which means if you experienced what love is, then you know that that is the beginning point, if you will, or the source from which it all began, came out of what love is, with a curved space spiral in spirit, which is on fire to create, to self-generate their own reality, or if you will, manipulate their own reality, because the energy that they're experiencing is connected to the primal sound field upon which it is made manifest by the power of their soul and their spirit, means that they are now free. They are no longer held captive by another unit of energy that's trying to hold their energy captive. The leashes, collars, and cages, right? Which simply means born free. You're free. So we know that love is what frees us. That's right. And that is the genius that was built in to the first crystal spiral, upon which creation is made manifest to self-generate our own reality, because we're using the love energy that we are in which it happens. And that's certainly simple enough to be able to describe and experience, because I could talk about those stories of all the experiences I've had just in the very short flashpoint time that I've been here and experienced heaven and paradise or nirvana within my own heart and soul in so many places that I've had the honor and the privilege to experience being with Mama. So yeah, and so it's another way to put this, because I know this because I experienced this, because it goes back to, remember when I was a firefighter when I was 17 years of age, I wanted to go up their military hierarchy in order to sort of change the way things are experienced, which basically means instead of having to be an order follower on behalf of a hierarchical corporate military AI integrated system, then imagine that you're working for a mother and a father, but you're not really working for me. We're doing this together because we're equal unto all in order to build a thriving community with us all, because it's not about competition. It's about all of us, right? In other words, when I was a child growing up, I realized I could use my creative mind and develop something and bring it into creation, right? Out of my own free will to do that, and then give it away. Here, it's yours. Do what you want with it. Because I don't perceive the universe of creation energy as something that belongs to me, because you realize just temporary. In other words, if I have self-generated something into the reality, it's meant for the benefit of the all creation, because it was generated out of eternal love. So if I'm generating something that comes out of my creative imagination, which is my mind, which is what love is, that goes on forever, gifting the high acceleration of primal electric currents, then it means that what has now been manifested into that reality stream, others will experience the eternal love from which it came, that they now experience in them. Which means if I realize there's something that will benefit me, chances are it will benefit you. So if I'm in love and service to others and I come up with something, then chances are, if I realize the benefit that I'm experiencing from it by experiencing the higher speed voltage of primal sound currents, right? Electrical currents that is expanding the capacity to experience more eternal love, right? Because now we become powerful generators of light energy, accelerating, right, the primal currents that are now being experienced by others. And particularly when you put it through the lens of a guardian who was a healer. So now they're experiencing the truth. Wow. The first template. Creation began out of what eternal love is. Yeah, of course. So therefore, it would be counterintuitive to experience something that isn't what love is, or fear, living in fear of what love is. So they live in fear of what love is. They live in fear of the one. Yeah, and that's a lie. Because we do no harm, because we represent what the love is. When you have become what love is, by choosing to serve forever on behalf of what love is, now you're experiencing what love is. It goes on forever. So you are naturally generating a high acceleration of primal currents. You're off and running. See ya. You're on your own. Right? So now when you couple that to children and how fast are they learning to run a high-speed tetrahedron magnetic drive motor. Brrr, wow. You know, it's like Lay mentioned me one time. Heck, our children learn by age 7. That was the number that she gave, age 7. The rainbow. You think it was a coincidence she happened to mention the number 7? Our children learn by age 7 how to become a high-speed drive motor. Brrr, accelerating the primal currents everywhere they go. Wow. Yeah. So it really does have everything to do with learning and the pathway that we choose to learn through and from, who our teachers are. So when you realize going after the teachers, killing off the clan mothers, cutting deals in a galaxy, you will certainly get the founder's attention. Right? And so the threshold was met. So, and that's a good thing. Because don't you think, just using common sense, that all children should have the right, like the right way, the right hemisphere way, the heart way, the heart way, the heart valve, you know, a clapper valve, a Venturi system, to be able to experience zero, which means now they're experiencing eternal energy as the inflow through them. They're now lit up like an 8-day clock, right? Now their high-powered creative imagination is accelerated. Whoa. And from an artist's perspective, as a first crystal spiral musician, oh man, that becomes, if you will, the glitter in the eyes of a mother and a father joined as one. What's possible? The dream. They have fulfilled our dream. Right? Which means they took it to a higher level. They took it to a higher level of possibilities. And what's possible to experience when creative imagination becomes the highest drive motor of the highest intelligence that will naturally protect what it is they're creating as they go. Which means you cannot experience what they experience unless you're running at the same vibrational speed that they are from which it was created. That's built in.